Since mankind first gained sentience, we've looked around at our surroundings and asked the question, why? Why are things the way that they are? How do things work? When we look at natural phenomenon, the sky, or anything regarding our world, we oftentimes turn towards gods and religion to answer these natural questions that science could not answer at the time. One could comfortably say religion is humanity's oldest invention, well before even the wheel or the spear. Even in the distant future of 2600 AD, religion is still an important factor in people's lives, particularly on Mars. But to understand how the people of Mars came to create their own religion of 13 gods, we must first take a step back and look at how life became the way that it was on Mars. In the year 2283, war occurred between Earth and Mars. Mars had become a bastion of revolution, of censor-free space where writers and poets and soldiers could spout their ideology free of persecution from Earth, and this had to be stopped. Earth would invade Mars ultimately and begin a ruthless campaign to try and root out this resistance. However, after 7 failed years of ongoing slaughter, Earth would resort towards nuclear bombardment of Mars, effectively dooming the residents of the Orange Giant. The year 2312 marked the official end of the war between Earth and Mars. It had caused catastrophic casualties in the millions for the Martians, effectively dooming them as a world. In the year 2600 AD, historians would still question why Earth ultimately did it. Such a grotesque and hideous gesture of genocide against one of Earth's most prominent colonies, it was unseen before in human history. But to understand why Earth committed such an egregious genocide, you first have to take a step back from that initial bombardment and look at why they were losing. In the year 2300, 12 years before the orbital bombardment, the 13 rose. 13 figures emerged from Mars, each of their exploits is stuff of legend. The government of Earth was quick to dispel their fame as disinformation, that the resistance was in fact losing, and that the colony would come back to the fold soon enough, all of which could not be further from the truth. Today we're going to be talking about the 13 gods of Mars, how they came to be, where they come from, and what they actually mean to the people of Mars. This is Simon, welcome to Soapbox, and today we're going to be talking about the lore of my books, the Godfall Chronicles. The year is 2600 AD, and to say that life sucks on Mars would be a bit of an understatement. Majority of folk live underground. Resources are limited, quality of life is atrocious, and the average lifespan on Mars in 2600 is about 30 years of age. It is a terrible existence to be born and live on Mars. The average lifespan of a Martian is full of survival, brutal dominance where the weak are culled quickly. Now, whether you are born as a nomad in the wastes or you happen to be lucky enough to live in one of the last remaining cities on Mars, the chances are very high that your life still arguably sucks immensely. And to cope with this brutal reality of life, the Martians often turn towards religion. You see, after the war between Earth and Mars ended in orbital bombardment, millions died. The terraforming process, which had been trying to make Mars green, had failed. The environment was failing. Water was a scarce resource. Any of the eco farms that grew their food were pretty much gone. It was a brutal 300 years of utter survival and annihilation. And yet through the 300 years of rebuilding, the Martians often turn towards the 13, deifying them. It's important to note that the 13 leaders from the Great War between Earth and Mars are not physically present in the year 2600, 300 years later. In fact, most people on Mars believe that during the Great War, the 13 died and that their souls went to heaven and became gods. And that's not to say there isn't other religions present on Mars in 2600. There is still Christianity and Islam and other religions from old Earth. However, believers of those faiths are quite often the minority. Majority of people on Mars adhere to the pantheon of the 13 gods. With that being said, let's get into it. Starting off at number 1, Sol Invictus, the king of the gods. Sol Invictus is depicted as having white skin, glowing yellow eyes. His followers are often leaders. Now, it's important to note that Sol Invictus' true name, his original name that he was born with when he fought against Earth, has been lost to history, and his followers now refer to him as Sol Invictus. He's considered king of the gods because when he was in human form, still a mortal, he was leading the 13 against Earth. In fact, during the Great War, it was Sol Invictus that actually led the armies of Mars, negotiated with our planets, and pretty much led the resistance. He is revered, and he's often seen as a positive influence on the rest of the pantheon of the gods. Number 2, Amor, the goddess of love. Depicted as a woman with golden skin and blue eyes, the goddess of love blesses all passion and fertility. Effectively, if you are a member of the pantheon of 13, you get married, your wedding ceremony is often dedicated towards the goddess of love and passion. She is often believed to bless the fertility of mothers. In fact, when a baby is born, it's often to Amor that the parents offer a sacrifice or an offering or some type of prayer to bless the life of that newborn. So overall, even though Amor may be the goddess of love, it's important to understand that it's not just passion, but also fertility. Number 3, Bargain, depicted as a normal man in a brown suit. With Bargain, what you see is what you get. Bargain was arguably the least important of the 13. However, despite not doing much during the Great War, he is still revered because he was the businessman that kept the pirate network working. You see, Mars during the Great War was suffering from an orbital blockade, and it was Bargain, whose original name was lost to time, who was able to set up a pirate network that snuck in supplies through the orbital blockade and kept the Martian ecosystem and supply and logistical chain going. In the modern day of 2600 AD, Bargain is revered among businessmen and clergy. Seen as the greatest and wealthiest businessman of all time, Bargain is now arguably one of the most important gods on Mars, especially within the corporations that run Mars. Coming in at number 4, Nema, the goddess of death. Depicted as having marble white skin, glowing orange eyes, and black hair, the followers of Nema are few but insanely loyal. The goddess of death is, in modern tense, the most minor of all the gods. In fact, she's really only prayed to or even cited during funerals. Beyond that, she's seen as a negative life. You see, despite previous pantheons of ancient Earth, the goddess of death in modern Martian sense is not viewed as a positive influence, more a dark guardian. She is there to guide you to the underworld, as the Martians believe. Coming in at number 5, Mariantor, the goddess of wisdom. Depicted as having white skin, glowing blonde hair, and having dove wings sprouting from her back, she's the patron of wisdom and science. Now, within the pantheon of 13 gods of Mars, Mariantor is one of the more stronger of the gods. You see, her followers are often doctors, scientists, or scholars. In fact, one of Mariantor's followers, Julia, would go on to join the Vagabonds and fight in the Second Great War, which came in 2600 AD. Coming in at number 6, Solon, the god of medicine. Depicted as a bald man with clear skin and glowing purple eyes, he is the patron of doctors, healers, and surgeons. Solon is a medium god. He's not exactly the most important, but he's certainly not the most minor. In fact, he is prayed to the most often across Mars. When one goes to a healer in the waste or hospital in the cities of Mars, you will often see Solon's sigil on the doors and frames of offices and hospital buildings to bless the healing that occurs within. You see, the people on Mars are a superstitious folk, and when going in even for a minor injury, they will immediately pray to Solon or offer a sacrifice for good grace from the god of medicine. Coming in at number 7, Oranos, the god of radios. His face is unknown, and his followers are known to be weird and reclusive. You see, the Oranos during the Great War was never actually seen. He was more depicted with photographs and online presence in the data network. However, despite not being physically seen quite often with his other 13 members, Oranos was easily one of the most important, as he was the one that made sure that all the fighting cells on Mars during the Great Wars would communicate clearly and effectively. In the modern year of 2600 AD, the followers of Oranos follow their god's example, being reclusive. There's often a stigma regarding the followers of Oranos, despite the fact that they're pretty much the only ones on Mars who know how to fix radios or any type of communication technology. They are often seen as the untouchables. Coming in at number 8, Arachne, the patron god of the spiders. Now, in order to explain the importance of Arachne, I must first explain why there's such a prevalence of what we would call cyborgs on Mars. You see, because Earth blasted Mars back to the Dark Age and they effectively had to restart civilization on dying rock, there wasn't a lot of resources or ability to restock technology like computers. To bridge this gap between production and need, the Martians began creating what's called spiders. These are cyborgs, people with cybernetic enhancement and extra metal limbs. It is a brutal and ruthless surgery often done to unwilling victims. However, despite the horror of the modern existence of spiders in 2600, if you backtrack 300 years, Arachne was the original cyborg to enter Mars. See, in the year 2300, Earth didn't have too much of a problem with cyborgs. In fact, it was quite common for rich or noble class people to have cybernetic enhancement. However, when the war broke out between Earth and Mars, Arachne would become one of the first cyborgs to join the resistance and fight back against Earth. Fast forward once again to 2600, and the spiders of Mars look up to Arachne as their patron god, often praying to free them from their suffering. Coming in at number 9, Vireo. Vireo is the god of flight. She's depicted as a woman with blue skin, white hair, and golden eyes. Vireo is a mixed case, neither positive nor negative. In fact, she is the patron of pilots. You see, when firejet pilots on Mars, or spaceship pilots, or really anyone that even dares leave the ground, the first thing they often do before even turning on their machines is giving a prayer to Vireo. You see, the goddess of the sky and wind is often seen as a fickle mistress. Just as the weather on Mars is unpredictable, so is her favor. Because of this, oftentimes Vireo's sacrifices will be much greater, and people tend to pray to her with much more passion. Coming in at number 10, Georgia, the god of fertile soil and earth. Depicted with green robes, white skin, and long flowing beard, Georgia is definitely the most, if not one of, the most important gods on Mars. You see, Georgia is one of the few gods of the 13 that was actually confirmed to be real. You see, during the Great War, Georgia was a terraformist, meaning a scientist working to terraform Mars. Their work was substantial. During the conflict that ultimately doomed Mars, it was the eco farms and the water sustainment facilities that was the first ones targeted by the EDF, the Earth Defense Force. It should also be noted that Georgia was the first member of the 13. He was the first god to show his abilities, and he was the first god to rally his other ascended fellows and lead Mars in resistance against Earth. In the modern year 2600 AD is the terraformists of Mars, the reclusive technocratic caste system that lives in the northern poles that often revere and pray to Georgia to bless their ongoing efforts to re-terraform Mars. Coming in at number 11, Hydronos, the god of water. The goddess of water is depicted as being Hispanic with olive skin and black hair, and she's the patron god of Oasis, the last water treatment plant on Mars. You see, water is extremely limited on Mars, and because of this, the city-state of Oasis, being the last water treatment facility on Mars, covetously protects their water at any cost, often with mercs, weapons, and aircraft. All the wealth and power that comes with being the last water treatment facility on Mars has turned Oasis from a slummy, small little settlement before the Great War into a bastion, a city-state that adrifts through the corporate and political intrigue of the Martian hellscape. This incredible success is often dedicated to Hydronos, the goddess of water. And in the great city-state of Oasis, you will find Hydronos shrines on every corner, on every street, as well as great temples. Coming in at number 12, Bellum, the god of war. Bellum is seen as a negative god. He is depicted with pale white skin, African features, and scarification tattoos. The god of war is quite prevalent on Mars, considering all the fighting that constantly happens and never ends. Between the city-states, the nomad clans, and the corporations, Bellum is often revered and prayed to. However, he is not a positive god. Again, the followers of Bellum are ruthless, strong, and relentless, often scarring their own flesh to honor their god. He is one of the few gods of the Martian pantheon that does not accept regular sacrifice. Instead, if one wants to pay tribute to the god of war, he must kill. Coming in at number 13, the Nameless One. The 13th and nameless god is often seen as the most despicable and lowly of all 13 gods. Even during the Great War, the other members of the 13 often quarreled with the Nameless One. In the modern year 2600 AD, even the followers of the Martian pantheon struggle to understand why people would even worship or follow the nameless god. You see, the followers of the nameless god are an odd bunch. You see, in order to become a nameless, one must first write down their name and burn it, effectively becoming anonymous. After one joins the nameless by giving up their name, they are never seen from again by the rest of Martian society. You see, the nameless are a caste of anonymous warrior monks. They are rarely seen leaving their monastery, but when they do leave, blood often flows. The followers of the 13th and nameless god are often seen wearing black robes, black armor, with helmets or masks with skulls painted on the front, depicting what caste system they're part of within the monk society. While no one truly understands the way of the nameless, they are revered as killers. Oftentimes, people will approach the monasteries of the nameless looking for contracts. If your motive is accepted, the nameless will often kill your target for money or blood. However, it's important to understand that the nameless are different than the bounty hunters Guild. You see, the Bounty Hunters Guild of Mars is an effective and actually organized business that runs off the bounties that they make. Vice versa, the nameless are anonymous killers, and you don't really know what you're getting into when you go to a monastery. Oftentimes, it's the most desperate and depraved that go to the nameless for a contract for a kill. In the next video, I will go over how the 13 became known as gods. This has been Simon. Welcome to Soapbox. Enjoy his content. Make sure to like and subscribe. Have a good day.